Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Yuan Ti and I am very passionate about turtles. So I'm learning to be a better GM, better player, and a better person. I want to share with you some of the cool stuff that I'm learning. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I want to talk to you about 3 D&D monsters that are pulled from non-Western folklore tradition from South and Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Japan specifically. And how those kind of original stories compare to how they show up in the monster manual. I'm sure you don't have to tell you that sometimes Wizards of the Coast handles cultural material kind of stupidly. And yes, that includes Western and European myths as well. And those are all really valid and important conversations, but that's not what we're talking about here today. This video is focused specifically on a few monsters from non-Western folklore from the areas I mentioned and how D&D reshapes them. The creatures that I'm talking about today, they all have an original context and meaning within that context. They aren't just stat blocks. They reflect spiritual beliefs, they reflect cosmology, values, fears, warnings, the stuff that shapes how people see the world. Real people told stories about these things for centuries and they still do today. But the monster manual has them kind of show up with this sort of fantasy shorthand, and they kind of get flattened into like just gimmicky villains. So if you stop there, you're leaving a lot of really rich, really powerful stories on the table. This is not a lore deep dive. These are broad strokes to just point some shit out. I really encourage you to do your own research if anything I say resonates. This is probably not much more than a jacket blurb, and yet you can always just not use these monsters, and that's fine. But like, I think they should be used, and I think you can use them with a little bit more respect, a little bit of intention. You're already researching like how an 18th century logging camp works, or how long a man who's not an athlete can hold his breath underwater, or like the speed of lava flows. Like, you're already doing all that research. This is no different. So do your own research, read the myths, learn how people relate to the stories. Like, that's where all the good stuff is. Number 1, Yuan Ti. Yuan Ti? I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I'll just blame the attacks here. But I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. Yuan Ti they're based on Nagas, who are sacred serpent beings in Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions across South and Southeast Asia. They're usually tied to like rivers, fertility, the underworld, and more broadly, the protection of cosmic wisdom and sacred knowledge. In some stories, they're sort of divine protectors, guarding artifacts, guarding knowledge, temples, and in some stories, even the Buddha himself. In other stories, they're kind of tempters or destroyers. They really symbolize the duality of power and desire. They are not inherently evil. They are powerful and complex. In the monster manual, you might not get the not inherently evil part in the monster manual because they are kind of just slavists and cultists and schemers. They're basically just humans who transform themselves into snakes for power, and now they operate through pretty cold-blooded and unsentimental hierarchies and mind control. Finally, let's use them at the table better. Don't make them cartoon villains. Let the party witness a worldview. Instead of evil cultists, think spiritual extremists. They believe that they're restoring a sacred order. They're not trying to win. They're trying to cleanse. They're trying to bring back something cosmic and something they believe in. Tell me that doesn't make them infinitely more interesting than just like mindless, power-hungry creatures who want thralls just because. So, play up their belief in faith, play up their belief in, divine orders, reincarnation. Number 2, Oni. In folklore, Oni are ogre-like demons from Japanese folklore. They are giant, horned, brightly colored figures that kind of show up from ancient bits, and they even show up in modern manga. A lot of stories have them kind of being bringers of destruction or punishment, and they're really closely tied to the Buddhist concept of hell, and they can kind of be elevated to being tormentors of the damned, of people who are truly evil. But just because they enact harm, that does not mean they're monsters. In many traditions, they are agents of karmic justice. They punish those who have done a spiritual wrong. So in a lot of other stories, they're kind of framed as like protectors because their monstrous visage is meant to like scare off evil spirits from temples or sites of spiritual goodness. We actually have something kind of similar in India. This is something that's just a decoration in my home. I'm Indian, if you couldn't tell. And we have something very similar where when you have sites of like new construction or a new baby is being born, or like basically there's some newness that's kind of tied to goodness or purity or anything like that, you have these protectors with monstrous visages meant to scare off evil. That's a part of today's spiritual culture. It's not some ancient myth that died years ago. So ultimately, Oni in many of the stories, they're sort of tragic figures. They're born from isolation and transformation, and ultimately they're not just one thing. They are incredibly layered, and they sort of blur the line between being judge, executioner, and redeemer. They are more than anything enforcers of consequence. In the monster manual, Oni are huge ogres that can shapeshift, they can fly, they can cast spells. Usually their MO is to shapeshift into humanoids, sneak around villages, and eat children, or corrupt the town from within, but usually eat children. That's kind of it. The folklore roots don't really come through. How you can use them at the table better? You can absolutely do more with them. So instead of just like monster in disguise, lean into their cosmic ritual nature rather than just being kidnapper. Oni are a moral ledger. Someone in this village did something spiritually wrong. We broke an oath, defiled a sacred place, and the Oni showed up to balance it. Maybe it's liars. Maybe it hunts the descendants of Oathbreakers. I'd recommend that the longer it takes for your players to kind of uncover their truth, the more deserving the victims start to seem. And the contradiction kind of comes after the players realize that the Oni's been sort of judging and, to their estimation, providing punitive redemption, correcting, and possibly they're not a villain, just a consequence. That's way more interesting than a shape-shifting ogre who eats children. Number 3, Djinn. Djinn are, in folklore, super powerful beings made of smokeless fire. They're mentioned extensively in Islamic texts and pre-Islamic European folklore. They are not demons, they are not genies in the lamp. They are a whole people. They have cities, they have dynasties, beliefs, free will, and they live in ruins, they live in deserts, crossroads. Some are helpful, some are wicked, some are deeply devout. Others are chaotic and vengeful. They are morally ambiguous and incredibly complex, and they are an otherworldly being. Probably most importantly, and they are not a dead myth. A lot of folks still recite prayers before entering a place believed to be occupied by a jinn. They are not wish granters. They are something that real people take seriously even today. In the monster manual, though, jinn are differentiated by elements. There's jinni who are airy and charming, usually like stormlords and that kind of thing. Freeti are angry and fiery. Dao are shrewd and earthen. And Marias are pompous water nobles. They generally rule elemental cities. They grant wishes, usually grudgingly. They're fun, but they're mostly treated just like quirky mini bosses with good loot. The cultural rules mostly get boiled down to big personalities. You can definitely use them at the table better. First, strip away the wish-giving trope. Think less magic lamp and more ancient power that remembers the birth of this kingdom 500 years ago. Djinn aren't here to serve the party, they're part of the world, and they've lived long enough and they are powerful enough that they probably have made pacts and oaths with divine creatures, with demons and devils. They've outlasted empires, maybe they've helped forge treaties between planes. Give them dignity, not just vibes. Let your players bargain with a creature that probably doesn't need them and maybe even sees them as young, small-minded, and kind of reckless. So yeah, that's just a handful. Literally, like, not even a handful. But it's definitely not a comprehensive list. Frankly, just scratching the surface of the ones that I mentioned even. Like I said, you should definitely do your own research because what I've shared is just a starting point. Especially because, as I said a few times, these stories are not from dead myths. Like, they didn't stop hundreds of years ago. They're not ancient tales that are passed around in hushed whispers. They are part of living, breathing traditions that still shape how people process the world. They show up in books, movies, family stories, spiritual practices. They are, once again, living traditions. So if you're going to use them in the game, take a moment to learn where these super cool concepts came from. and why they still matter, why they matter to begin with. Makes for better storytelling, makes for better games. The Mastermind gives us hit points and stat blocks, but I really feel like the folklore and cultural significance is where the soul of the thing lives. And if you bring that to your table, even just a little, your world gets so much richer and deeper. You don't have to be an expert. I'm certainly not. I'm just curious, and you just have to be respectful in asking, what did this story mean to people who told it first, and what does it mean to them now? That one question will take you so far. And literally, like, what's the point of the internet and your local library if not for stuff like this? So anyway, I hope this sparks something in you. A culture you want to look into, a monster you want to rethink, maybe a myth you want to dig into. If you are going to bring the game, and I hope you do, take some time to read up, ask questions, think about what they meant before they became just a stat block. Anyway, if you like this video, consider subscribing. But if you don't like notifications or subscriptions, I do have a backlog of stuff. And I also have an audio-only podcast format that has transcripts. And I have a written blog format if that's better for folks from like an app accessibility perspective. Links to all that and a couple of APs I'm on in the description. Otherwise, thank you so much for hanging out. Come see me again soon. Bye.